Shalom, and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Mallam, and in Highland Park, New Jersey, Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation Shemed. With me, as always, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School, Long Island, and Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski at the Anshe Chesed in New York City. It's great to see you. Boy,
Great to be
you're looking very formal, both of you. I'm the most informal here. That's okay. Let's get right into it. This is Parshat Mishpatim. It's also Shabbat Shkalim and Rosh Chodesh. This Shabbat. This is an amazing Parsha.
I was thinking that myself. They keep getting better and better.
This is an amazing Parsha. I would say this is really one of the most important Parshas in the Torah. Okay, because of something that takes place at the end of the Parsha, which we will talk about. But before we get into that, we are, of course, entering, I would say, a new gateway into the Torah here. And with that, I want to introduce the concept that the Torah is giving us a code. In Parshat Yitro, the Torah gave us the 10 Commandments, admittedly a code of a certain type, but now we're getting into a different kind of literature, a different kind of text. So just, can you give us a kind of 30,000 foot view of this as a text? I think we'll start with you, Jeremy.
Well, I would say that the 10 Commandments, I would differ slightly in how I would phrase it. The 10 Commandments, I think they're maybe a code of a certain kind, but they're really like the preamble. They're, like, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, we've got some principles here, but to be able to make them hook onto the world, we need to not stay at 30,000 feet. We need to get all the way down into the details. And this is a religion, all of our listeners and viewers know this in one way or another. This is a religion that does not rest with big ideas and big principles. This is a religion that says, I want to know precisely how you're going to handle the innumerable ways that people have conflict with each other, and the way people might wrong each other, the people might injure each other. I want to know in really practical ways, how can we turn normal daily human conduct into a realm for mitzvah, and a realm for ethics and virtue and justice and all those things. And what's amazing about Judaism, like so many wonderful things about Judaism, but one of them is that there is a religious dimension to business and how you buy and sell and how you dig a hole in your yard. I mean, like, who would have thought that how somebody digs a hole in their yard is something that the Torah would care about? And yet, in the code here of Parshat Mishpatim, that's of major religious significance.
So if I could just rephrase it, it's the 10 Commandments is the preamble, and then Ve'ela HaMishpatim. And this is the way you have to live. These are the statutes by which you have to live, Barry.
Right. So what I would add to what Jeremy said is that we see this in a literary way as well, because the 10 Commandments really require chapter 19, the narrative which precedes them, to understand them, both in terms of the text itself, I think, but also in what it's doing in Sefer Shemot. But the Mishpatim are kind of a standalone. The narrative is going to pick up in chapter 24, which we'll get to at the end, but the laws stand on their own. They can be separated out, and there's plenty to discuss, the individual laws, how the laws fit together. But I think it was, as Jacob Neusner once observed, it's a religion of pots and pans. This is nitty-gritty stuff.
It's nitty-gritty stuff, but okay, so let's pick a law. Let's do the first law. Ki tikneh eved ivri shesh shanim yavor. If you acquire a Hebrew slave, so setting aside the moral objection to slavery right now and the context that we have, what is the Torah telling us? And is there a narrative underneath this commandment? And Barry, I think I want to.
Yeah, I think there's always a narrative behind the law, and here the narrative is quite clear. It was only a few weeks ago that our ancestors left Egypt, where their experience had been for hundreds of years, depending on how one counts, slavery. And now they're emerging into freedom. And the first thing they have to be told is that you're not going to be a permanent slave anymore. That there could be circumstances in your life that are quite difficult to deal with, and you may end up being a slave, but your slavery as a free person, I guess is kind of an oxymoron, is going to be bounded in time and in the way that the master has to treat you. The master cannot do everything that he wants because he has a responsibility to you because he's an Eved, you're an Eved Ivri, you are one of him.
Can we
I
address
would
that?
say, yeah, I would say that I firmly agree with what you just said about, there's always a narrative, sometimes we've got an implicit narrative. And I would tell a little slightly tangential or narrative about slavery, which is that there is always going to be, in the nature of, human society, there are always going to be powerful and powerless people. There's always going to be people who get into trouble. Why was somebody an Eved Ivri in the ancient world? Either they had a debt that they just could not pay, and the creditor, had deserves repayment, or the person got caught in a theft and can't repay the debt that they have. And so the Eved Ivri comes along to say, we're not giving up on you. We are going to create a social system that is going to allow you to pay off your debt. The Eved Ivri, first of all, the Hebrew word Eved has a wider semantic range than just slave. It also means servants. We are avadim to God. We are all God's servants as well. So I think that the Eved Ivri, the slave, the Hebrew slave or the Hebrew servant, it is actually part of a positive narrative about wealthy folks taking on as employees in an unequal relationship, because there's always inequality. You're never just going to wipe away inequality. It is unequal. I'm not apologizing for that. But the wealthy person is going to take for a time this person and help them pay off their debts and give them a job and feed them and take care of them. And if the halacha, the later halacha, is to be believed, really treat them as one of the family.
So would you say that within the evolution of halacha, the evolution of biblical law, and as it is elaborated through Mishnah and through Talmud, how does the tradition see this institution, and what does it do to kind of alleviate what we would say is morally objectionable about the whole idea of slavery here?
Well, in halacha, as it's elaborated by the sages, the Eved Ivri, the Hebrew servant, has all sorts. As the statement goes, you acquire a slave, you acquire a master. If you acquire a Hebrew slave, you acquire a new master, because the person has just claims upon the master in this case for a certain kind of treatment, and you cannot make that person work befarech. Barry talked about the Egyptian experience as sort of being part of the narrative that contextualizes this. What Egyptians did was work them befarech, with cruelty, with ruthlessness, and what you cannot do is to treat that person as chattel. That you don't own them, you don't own their bodies, they work for you, and you have to give them Shabbat. First of all, the whole point of Shabbat is to so that your servants can rest as you do, because I took you out of Egypt. And you can't, as the laws go, for example, you can't say to them, for example, just dig this hole until I get tired. No, you explain the purpose of what you're asking them to do, and it has to be not pointless, it has to be productive, all of which helps the person feel a sense of productivity, and that's part of the narrative. One other thing that's not about the slave per se, but it is about wealth and poverty. One of the mitzvot in this parsha is that if a person is borrowing, you are supposed to give. This is a parsha that includes the mitzvah of interest-free loans and the prohibition on taking interest. You have to give your fellow Jew an interest-free loan. By the way, tzedakah in the Bible is not really gifts; it's loans. But you can take a pledge, you can take a collateral. But if you take a collateral as a garment, you have to return it back to that person every single night, so the person can sleep, and they give it back to you the next day. It is this person's only garment. Hisimatola oro. That's his shirt. Bamei yishkav. What's he gonna sleep in? That's a detail in the rule that the Torah has told, a little story to make you feel how cold it must be for this person.
And wait, and finish the punchline. If he screams, if he If he prays to me, the shamati, I'm going to hear him.
Yeah.
So here you get not only the context of his story, you get the emotion, the anguish of it.
Divine emotion.
Exactly.
Right. So what I would add here is that one of the undercurrents is that the situation can always be reversed, right? We talk about the Eved Ivri because anyone can be an Eved Ivri. Even the master, his circumstances could be such that one day he might become an Eved Ivri. And what all these laws ultimately, I think, come to teach us is that to live in a community means that we live in a relationship with other people, that no one lords it over another human being because we're all created in the image of God, and God is the one true master.
So what law contains, and this is the code, there are the rules here, there's our interpretation, but there's life underneath this. Go back to verse 20, chapter 2, verse 22, verse 20. V'gir lo toneh v'lo tilchatzenu. Here we're not talking about a slave, but we're talking about the stranger in your midst, and that, of course, is a legal technical category. It's a stranger in your midst. What a landed person or not, we'll leave that. Lo toneh, do not oppress. V'lo tilchatzenu, do not really exert force on. Ki gerim heitem, because you were strangers, Beretz Mitzrayim. So what is the import of that law? What is it trying to do for us?
But later we're going to get ki datem et nefesh hager, right?
Yeah.
You know what it's like. I think that we were talking before we started recording about the impulse to exploit. Is it just a piece of humanity that some of us are just going to be cruel jerks? We're greedy, we're self-aggrandizing, and that cruelty is just part of the human character. It's a yetzer hara. Is it perhaps a residue of having been oppressed befarech in Egypt? I don't really know exactly how to answer that question about where our cruelty comes from, but I do know that religions, at least this religion, are trying to educate that cruelty out of us by training us in empathy and love. And verses like this, which are not, unlike Pauline Christianity, unwilling to say, well, listen, the higher law is love, just love, don't worry about the details. This religion says, first of all, we got a lot of details, and if you study Bava Metzia and Bava Kama and Bava Batra, you're gonna get into the details in all their precision. But it's because you care about the experience of these folks, and you want to train the members of our religious society to say, well, what's he going to sleep in? Or, the marginal, the ger yatom v'almana, the stranger, the orphan and the widow, we have to care about them, so we care for them.
So would you say that the driving question that Mishpatim is trying to answer is, what kind of person are you to become, and what kind of society are we to create?
I'd say that exactly.
Absolutely. So for example, you could take almost every single verse here, even ayin tachat ayin, shein tachat shein, which is the laws. It's we translate eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? It's back in chapter 21, verse 23. Ayin tachat ayin, shein tachat. If you've damaged someone, things that fall out of you, things that fall off of you, bruises, whatever. And of course, we understand that as monetary compensation, it's a society that tries to create the just retribution and compensation for loss. And of course, we have built tractates and tractates on almost every single verse of this text. We could choose anyone. Again, kigerim heitem mitvar sheker tirchak.
I love that. That's a big one to me.
Okay, chapter 23, verse 7. Midvar shecher tirchak. Go ahead.
Do not keep far from falsehood. Not only don't lie, but keep far away from all those lies. To be like you asked the question, Elliot. What kind of person to be, and I think that's a very key ethical question. There are a lot of rules, and so a lot of specific behaviors you have to do. But to me, it's really strongly important that the behaviors not only are, that the laws are not only about the specific behavior, do this, don't do that, but let those behaviors shape you. So don't lie, but be a person who shuns falsehood. That to me is huge.
And again, it goes on into the text regarding justice, the shochad lo tikach, don't take a bribe, ki shochad yaver pikchim, the bribe will blind those who have open eyes. The ger lo tilchatz, again, back to that stranger, the emphasis on compassion, empathy for the life of someone who is alienated in your land, ki gerim eitem be'eretz Yisrael. So that repetition obviously has an impact on us. Are we ready to turn to the end of the Parsha? Some big moment. Okay, so the big moment at the end of the Parsha is this covenant ceremony where Moshe goes up the mountain. It's kind of complicated there.
It seems like that from the beginning of from the end of Yitro, with the some rules about the creation of the Mizbeach, some architectural rules about how to build the altar and the steps. Up until here in 24, it seems like a unit got placed in there because remember at the end of 19, Moshe goes up to God. God says, "Go back down, and then you and Aaron come back up." It seems like that takes place now in 24.
Yeah.
5 chapters later, when Moses and Aaron and Nadav and Abihu and 70 elders do come up and have another meeting with God.
All right, so let me get your reaction to the verse. This is verse 24:3. Vayavo Moshe, vayisaper la'am et kol divrei Adonai. Moses comes down, he tells, and I love the idea that he's telling it. There's a certain narrative embedded in that word.
He's going to go tell it on the mountain.
He's going to go tell it on the mountain. Okay, Ved kol Mishpatim, and the laws. And now, Jeremy, Vayan kol ha'am, kol echad. I mean, this is an echo to last week.
Yes.
What does that mean? Na'aseh, vayomru kol advarim asher diber Adonai na'aseh. Barry, take a shot.
We will do it.
We're going to do it.
We got the message. We're ready to march.
So I want to ask you, does this response reflect fear, awe, or desire, or does it affect willingness?
I would say it's an ecstatic utterance. The people are so overwhelmed that in jubilation they say yes.
So is this like a Nike, yes we can, or is this a wedding?
It's reminiscent of some churches where the congregation is going along with the preacher. And it's not just the preacher preaching, but the whole congregation is involved, not always as response, but in actually giving the sermon with the preacher.
Have you ever been in a service like that?
Not personally, no. I've seen them on TV.
I was once invited to a service like that, and it was a different experience. Okay, it was like, you go, man, you go, tell it, Rabbi.
Right. So, and then a little later we'll have the variation. It will be Nasev and Nishma.
Okay, so what we have is you're saying it's enthusiasm. Is there a legal aspect to this? Is there?
Oh, this is big. This is big. The other one that you gave us, the other promise that you floated out there was it's like a wedding. Is it an I do? And there's at least one way in which it totally is. There's a covenant ritual that's going on here. And Moses takes a basin full of blood and splashes it on the altar and splashes half of the blood on the people. This covenant ceremony. This is chashuv. This is like really. This is
serious stuff.
Serious stuff. Flesh and blood, baby. This is a religion of flesh and blood. You enter, if we are male, we enter this religion as babies in blood. Certainly, as you know, people who they become Jews by choice, they enter in blood. And at Mount Sinai, there is a blood oath too. We promise to do this. And we're in it. We're in it to win it. We're in it for life, and that's tremendously dramatic.
Well, what I was thinking earlier today when I was reading through this is that this blood reminds me of the last blood that we saw, which was on the doorpost in Egypt. That this is a different kind of blood of redemption. There, the mashchit was going to pass over the houses of the Israelites. Here, the blood allows us to enter into the covenant with God. And it's ironically a cleansing blood. But I think many of us, if we hear the story told in a different context, they start spilling blood all over the people and we go, yuck. But that's not the response here. It's not a terrible experience. It's not inesthetic. It is, in fact, what the situation demands. This way of participating in the great life force with the little life force, as it were, the blood.
So I,
You know,
I taught this text this week to my class, and I pulled up a scholar who recounted, who speaks about the blood as the function of the blood is indexing, which is that it connects, it points to, and the blood on the doorpost was a pointer, and the blood here is pointing, and what we're pointing to is relationship. That there is a relationship here, and I mean, as intimate as it is and as graphic as it is, it's where it really lives. This is
right. And here it's worth recalling that we have our folk expressions that blood is thicker than water.
yeah.
This is a tie that's much tighter and much greater because we're creating a family.
All right. So in the ceremony, Moshe's on the mountain with the elders, and they have the slaughter, and they then Vayishlach et Na'arei B'nai Yisrael. I love the idea that it's the Na'arim here, and I said, if as a modern rabbi, this is a way of saying we got to get the youth involved. We got to get the youth involved. Okay, that the youth are involved in the sacrifices, and then Vayikach Sefer Abrit, he takes it's the document of the covenant. Vayikra Bo'oznei Ha'am. He's not inventing any speeches here. He's actually reading it word for word. And now the climax, or the penultimate moment, because the climax is sprinkling the blood. Kol Asher Diber Adonai Na'aseh V'nishma. Okay, so a Jeopardy question: greatest lines in the Torah for 300, Alex.
what is Na'aseh V'nishma?
What is that? Could this be one of our best lines?
Oh yeah. I mean,
what strikes you?
The poetic. First of all, there's so much in it that's poetic, and the poetic quality of Na'aseh V'nishma is, for many centuries at least, partly because people misread it a little bit. I mean, the pshat is Na'aseh, we'll do it. Nishma, we will heed. Heed. We will obey. Lishmoa can mean to obey, but for many centuries and centuries and centuries, we've read it as letting the commitment to do precede the commitment even to hear what it is. We're so in it. You just tell us, and we're going to follow you, over that mountain, no matter what. But one of the common interpretations that I like is built on nishma being lishma, meaning to understand what it means. Like, I hear you. Shomea ani et dvarecha. I hear what you're saying. Na'aseh v'nishma means you'll do it, and then you'll come to an understanding. You often hear people, as a rabbi, and I'm sure you guys, hear people say, "Well, I want to understand what it is before I discover whether I'm going to do it." That's not possible. It's not like a good idea. It's simply not possible to understand something from the outside without practicing it, and then you make a judgment on whether you want to incorporate it. It's only by doing things that you experience their meaning.
So these two words really shape a whole way of life. I mean, we practice, and then throughout the course of our life, we add understanding. And I would also add that our understanding changes through the course of our life. Barry, as a younger person, Shabbat means something to you when you are 30. It's something else when you are 40, 50, and beyond. Okay?
What's 40 or 50?
Exactly.
I think that, part of our task is to remind people that religion ultimately is not rational. There are rational components to it, but as Jeremy was saying, you have to be immersed in it. This is kind of a mikvah moment. You have to jump in, right? The leap of faith is to jump in to the mikvah, as it were, to the Sea of Talmud, however you want to configure it, this water, and be surrounded and be embraced. And then you begin to understand. If you wait the understanding to come first, you'll remain on the outside, perhaps forever.
We've had those experiences, when we take people to the mikveh for conversion. I don't think there's, it's among the most profound moments in the life of a rabbi. Certainly, it's certainly the most, or one of the most profound moments in the life of the prospective convert, where they are immersed, or they're in the water. I don't know how you do, Jeremy, but we do ask them, and if it's a woman, we're outside the door, of course, and we say, do you accept all malchut shamayim? Do you accept the mitzvot, all mitzvot? And it's almost as if their answer is nasa v'nishma. Yeah, we make that commitment. It's a very, very profound moment. I don't think.
Well, so what adds to what you said is that the rest of their lives is their attempt to understand what they've taken on.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, that's the joy. That's the joy of being Jewish, or one aspect of the joy. It's an intellectual joy, but it's also the spiritual joy of this. We're constantly seeking a way of understanding this.
I feel like one of the things that I want to say to contemporary people, in a very consumerist American society, and I am not busting on anybody's chops, but you'll sometimes hear people talk about this phrase, which I completely hate, and you know that they're just trying to say something kind of cool, whatever. Because people talk about it's a spiritual technology or a spiritual wellness or some garbage like that. It's not a wellness technology. It's a commitment and a journey of discovery. And it's not like an app that you can download that will make your life better in this or that way. I think it will make your life better, but it's because it's a covenant made with past and future, and with Am Yisrael, B'kol Makomot Shehem, wherever they are. And in this ancient anthropological passage that we just read, that involves splashing blood on a people and a place, and reading a book etched in stone, and that sense of, by living in a way, you discover, it discloses its meaning to you, and you grow as a person. That to me, the depth of that is just like, it's I cannot even articulate the depth of what this path is like.
And the midrash is, they have a refrain, and all the midrashim on Naaseh v'nishma, the phrase is sheikdimu naaseh lishma, when they put the doing before the understanding. There are tons of midrashim that deal with the placing of crowns on the Israelites' head, and Bnei Israel. They're in a moment of splendor. Okay, so we're running out of time. We're just about to end. I don't know, take it right to the end of this parsha, and we'll talk about narrative, mystery, and joy, and awe. So the last verse, Vayavo Moshe b'toch anan, there's a cloud, the mountain is full of fire and cloud. Moses goes into the cloud, Vayal el har, it goes up to the mountain, Vayi Moshe bahar, Moses is on the mountain, Arba'im yom, Arba'im laila, da 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 da, 40 days.
Yeah, that's crazy.
40 days and 40 nights.
Why does he have to be there for 40 days and 40 nights?
Exactly.
There's going to be a test at the end.
So the experience, I think, it reflects part of our own spiritual yearning, is that we want to be on top of the mountain. And we want to be there as long as we can be. But as Moshe finds out, life takes place at the bottom of the mountain, not on the top.
I think of 40 days as a minimum amount of time that is necessary for a kind of major transition in your life. I don't know. So who's the transition for? Is it for Moshe or for the people, or both? It's in every way. Everybody's transitioning here. And of course, what we're going to see in subsequent great parshas is the way that the people deal with this transition, which is...
Well, actually, that's pretty interesting, because the transformation from Moshe is successful, and I think arguably the point is that the transformation for the people is unsuccessful, because it may take longer. It may take 40 years.
40 years, yes.
Because 40 days later, Moshe comes down with miraculous tablets and says, okay, guys, we got it. Wait, what the hell are you doing? What's with the cow?
Well, we'll have to get to that story in a future Parsha. That's only coming in a couple of weeks from now. In the meantime, we'll have to end it here. We're just getting warmed up. I just get the feeling we're getting warmed up into this, but we want to give everyone a sense of this warmth, this joy of Torah, the study. Of course, wishing refuah shlema to those who are watching us and going through different physical and emotional and also spiritual, challenges. We want to wish you a refuah shlema. We want to thank you for watching and listening to us, and join us again next week. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom from Parsha Talk.